For most of my life, I thought perfectionism was one of my strengths. I thought it meant I cared. I thought it meant I had standards. I thought it meant I was committed to doing great work. Now, I think it was mostly fear wearing a very cute, respectable outfit. Because when I look back at my life and I can see the trail it left behind, 20 years building other people's businesses while hiding from building Veronica Dietz, most opportunities than I could really count because I wanted to feel ready first. So, countless websites, offers, positioning statements, and content revisions because I thought the answer was in the wording. More revisions than I really could count when what was actually needed was a decision. Perfectionism doesn't always look like obsessing over tiny details. Sometimes it looks like becoming incredibly skilled at preparation. You research, you learn, you refine, you tweak, you optimize. You tell yourself you're making progress. And sometimes you are, and sometimes you're just building a very elaborate, very productive way to avoid finding out what happens next. And that was me. And that was me for years. I kept thinking if I could just get it right enough, I would finally feel confident enough to be in the spotlight. But confidence for the spotlight never arrived because the confidence wasn't waiting on the other side of my perfection. Confidence was waiting on the other side of movement. And movement requires a decision, not another revision, an actual decision. Welcome to the Aligned Edit. I'm Veronica Dietz, founder of Taiki Digital Agency, diagnostic strategist and growth advisor. I help founders figure out what is actually wrong with their business before they spend another dollar or moment trying to fix the wrong thing. This is season 4, and I'm genuinely glad that you're joining us. Today, we are talking about perfectionism. Not as a personality quirk or a humble brag that most of us founders use to sound self-aware in our introductions. I'm such a perfectionist, but as a misdiagnosis, that's what we're talking about. Meaning you thought you were solving one thing and you were actually solving something else entirely. What does that even mean? That's what we're going to get into. And because the diagnosis was wrong, the treatment never worked. So if you're constantly working on perfecting your offer, you're never actually offering your offer. So I've lived this for a long time and I see it constantly in my clients and in founders that I've not just worked with, but I've collaborated with or had conversations with or have just observed. And I think the usual way perfectionism gets talked about is too shallow to really be useful. So let's get into the misdiagnosis because a misdiagnosis means the whole frame is wrong. So even when you work hard, you're solving the wrong problem beautifully. So here's the perfectionism misdiagnosis in plain language. You think the problem is that the work isn't good enough yet. So you keep working on the work. The work gets better, but the thing you're actually afraid of never gets addressed because you actually never named it correctly in the very first place. What you were actually afraid of was the moment after. What does that even mean? It's not the work. The exposure that comes when the work is done and you have to put it somewhere and let people respond to it, that is a different problem. And it requires a completely different response. So improving the work does not reduce the exposure, and it never did. No matter how good the thing gets, the moment of release feels the same because quality was never the variable that controlled the fear. The act of releasing it was. When you're inside the pattern, the logic makes total sense. The thing isn't ready, so you aren't ready. So you keep working on the thing. It's reasonable. Except the threshold for ready keeps moving because it was never really about the threshold. It was about avoiding the moment after, the one where you run out of work to do on it and have to actually decide. And that is the trap, especially effective because it really is keeping you genuinely busy and genuinely improving. There's real evidence of progress. So it doesn't feel like avoidance because you're being productive. You're putting in the hours, you're putting in the time, you're putting in the research. It feels like diligence. Babe, it's avoidance. Polish is measurable, and that's it. That's the whole reason. You can always tell whether something is more polished than it was yesterday. The copy is tighter, the design is cleaner, the offer language is sharper, the site looks more expensive. Real, observable, defensible improvements. And when you're operating out of fear, measurable progress is enormously comforting. It gives you something to really point at when someone asks you what you're working on. A version of forward motion that doesn't require you to face the moment after. Because decisions don't do that. A decision gives you an outcome. Outcomes can go wrong. They can disappoint. They can confirm the fear you've been carrying around since the very beginning. There is no amount of polish that protects you from that. So you stay in the work. You stay in the refinement. You call it standards. And sometimes that's accurate. And sometimes it's a story you're telling yourself so you don't have to face the moment after. For me, it was both at once, which is honestly the most annoying version. And I genuinely have high standards. The work was genuinely better for the time I put into it, but that's not why I was putting time into it. I was putting time into it because it was the version of work that kept the moment after at a distance. And here's the structural problem. Polish is infinitely available. There is always something you can make better. No ceiling on refinement, because that means if you're using polish as an avoidance mechanism, you will never, ever, ever run out of reasons to keep going, to keep polishing, to keep refining. That's not a discipline problem because you're actually executing day after day the work. This is a structural problem, and those require different solutions. So, what does that look like in a business? Let me talk about it. This does not stay in your head. It shows up in your business everywhere. So the website that's been almost ready for 8 months, not because it's bad, because there's always one more thing. The copy gets tighter, the design got cleaner, the brand colors got more intentional, and somehow it still isn't live. I have had this conversation more times than I could count, and every single time the founder tells me it's almost done. It's almost there. We're almost there. And every single time they say this, the offer that gets repositioned every quarter, not because the market shift, because you're not fully certain you can deliver what you said. So you change what you said, so you never have to find out. The content that gets written and written again and then rewritten again and then never posted, the pitch that gets refined until the window closes, the price that gets reconsidered every time someone doesn't buy, even though the price was not the problem. These are not random. These are all part of the same pattern wearing different clothes. And the business cost compounds in a way that's really easy to underestimate. While you're optimizing the website, someone is running a worse website and getting clients from it. While you're repositioning your offer, someone is selling a less elegant version of your thing and building a track record you don't even have yet. While you're rewriting the content, someone else is out there posting imperfect content consistently and becoming the name their audience thinks of first, putting you in irrelevant cloud. No one's even paying attention to you. Perfectionism in business doesn't protect you from failure. It just means you're losing data. The version of you that launched 6 months ago would have learned something by now. The questions people ask when they hear your offer. What makes them say yes? What makes them hesitate? What language they use to describe the problem you solve? That information will only exist on the other side of the launch. No amount of internal refinement generates it. No amount of perfecting the words, the price, the offer, the design, the colors, the visuals, none of that changes the offer to resonate with a buyer. You're not losing time. You're losing very valuable data. And without that data, you keep refining based on assumptions instead of evidence, which means the loop has no natural stopping point. We're on a carousel of perfectionism. When I work with founders as their diagnostic partner, this pattern shows up in a version I want to get very clear and specific about because I don't think it gets named enough. And that's why I talk on this episode about perfectionism. That's why I record these every day. That's why I publish this information on my blog. I talk about it on Threads because these conversations are not happening. It's the service provider who is incredible at what they do and running their business on duct tape and willpower. The mental health professional who can regulate everyone else's nervous system, but her own business feels like one bad month away from collapsing. The therapist, the coach, the consultant, all deeply skilled, mostly fully booked, completely burned out. They're pricing themselves at a rate that guarantees they have to keep working at this pace forever just to cover their expenses, just to make it month by month. The perfectionism isn't absent here. It just looks different for everyone. It's not a refinement spiral on a website. It's a perfectionism of delivery. Every client gets your full attention, your full expertise, your full capacity. You are meticulous about the work. And while you were perfecting the work, nobody was building the business. The business got built around the work. So the work is good. The results are real and great. They're fantastic. Clients are raving. But the structure underneath is held together with the tools that don't talk to each other. Intake processes that are living in your inbox, pricing that stopped making sense a very long time ago and just hasn't had the time to show up on your calendar to address. And I'm sorry, I'm a mess is not a diagnosis. It's a symptom that's very loud of a business that was built to run on you instead of built to run. Let me say that again. Your current stresses, your current very loud symptoms are just communicating that your business was built to run on you when the whole time it should have been built to run. And you can't get to the structural solution if you're still diagnosing yourself as the problem. If only I was, more open to not being such a perfectionist, if only I could just execute it and feel good about having the misspelling and the grammars incorrectly, whatever your excuse is. And let's be real, they're excuses. Those are the things that are holding you back. You are human and you're allowed to show up in your current state. And sometimes that's not perfect. So what is the alternative? And it's not just ship it, make it happen, execute it, because just ship it is not a strategy. It's a reaction to a real problem that doesn't account for an actual mechanism. Some things genuinely need more work before they go out. This is true. Some offers are structurally broken, and launching faster just generates faster evidence of a structural break. confused positioning usually creates confused buyers. So, no, the answer is not just ship it. The answer is asking one question: what decision am I not making? Because in my experience, when a founder is in a refinement spiral, there is almost always a decision underneath it, a decision about direction, about who the business is actually for, about what you're willing to stop doing. And the refinement is running on top of the decision like a holding pattern. You're circling because you haven't landed. And you haven't landed because landing is where you face the moment after. So before you do one more revision on whatever you've been revising, name the decision you'd have to make if the revision were done. Like, actually name it. Write it down. Think about it. What is the next step that requires you to commit to something? If you can name it, you found the real thing. And the question becomes whether you're ready to make that call. So it's not whether your copy is good enough. Your copy is probably fine. What it cost me and what changed, I said 20 years ago at the top of this episode, and let's get clear about what that means, because I'm not saying that for a dramatic effect. I've been in marketing and sales, in bootstrap businesses, startups, Fortune 500 boardrooms, and I've been really good at my job for a very long time. I was actually just having a conversation with a past employer, and he actually called me because he wanted me to work for him again. And then we were joking. I was like, why does this always happen to me? Why do my past employers, my past bosses, the past CEOs and founders of their business always want me to come back? I always get a phone call or an email, and this is the 5th time this has happened to me in my life, where they've begged me like, hey, what are you doing right now? I would love for you to come back. I can offer you more money or a better role or better benefits, whatever. They're really trying to get me back. And that's who I am. That's who I show up for the job. I digress. But anyways, for a very long time, when the job was clearly defined and I wasn't the thing being evaluated, there was a little bit of comfort. I built positioning strategy and brand infrastructure for other people's businesses. I understood how to diagnose what was wrong, how to find the misalignment, how to name what was off. I developed a skill over years, and it was really something that's always been embedded in me, and I just learned how to use it in business. And none of that time was really wasted. It was all part of the plan. It was all part of my growth and my journey. And I kept that skill attached to other people's names. Not because I couldn't have done it sooner, but because I kept deciding I wasn't ready. It isn't about me. If this role at this job wasn't what I was working in, how would I even know how to do any of this? I gave too much credit to other circumstances, other people, other environments, and it wasn't giving enough credit to the fact that this was me and this was my superpower. And that's why former employers call me back and ask me if I would return. Because I have the special secret sauce that I was offering to them. And they realized it was me, not the position. So I digress again. But really, what I was doing functionally was not so different from a lot of the founders I just described. The ones that have duct tape systems and doing all their transactions on Venmo. We were all doing the same thing. We were keeping the work close and the decisions at arm's length. For them, really, the decision is usually about structure. What kind of business are we actually building? What has to change for this to be sustainable? And for me, the decision was about ownership. Whether Veronica Dietz was going to be the point or just the person behind the scenes making other points land. It's a different shape, and it's the same avoidance, same refusal to find out. And the thing that changed was not a mindset shift, okay? It wasn't a book or a coach or a movement of clarity. What had changed was that I ran out of the road on the alternative. The cost of staying in preparation became something I could see and name, and it became larger than the cost of facing the moment after. So the math changed, not my feelings. It was the math, it's data. So I think the founders I work with, the ones saying I can't keep going like this, are often closer to the moment than they realize. And it's not because it gets easier, because it doesn't. There's no smooth process once you reach this milestone. It's because the cost of the current structure eventually becomes impossible to ignore. And when it does, the question isn't whether to change. The question is whether you know what to change. That is the diagnosis part. That's what I do. If this episode is landing and you're realizing the problem may not be your standards, it may be the decision your standards are protecting, I would start with my freebie, Why This Feels Off. It's a free resource I built for founders who know something isn't working, but haven't been able to locate where. So you can find it at veronicadietz.com. It takes about 10 minutes. It's worth 10 minutes. And if you want to work through this with someone, that's the work I do. So we find the thing that's out of place and we name it. And we figure out, what clean moves we should be taking from there. It's all about getting very clear, diagnosing the load-bearing issue, which is usually very quiet because all symptoms are very loud, and then we direct you where to be putting your time and effort, because your time, your effort, your money is valuable, and you want to invest it somewhere that has a high ROI. So $500, 1 hour, you and me, working session. You don't have to come prepared. You'll leave with a 90-day decision map. This is called the direction session. I'll also link that in the show notes. Because at the end of the day, your time is so valuable, and perfectionism is not a quality control mechanism. It is an information avoidance mechanism. It keeps you in a loop where the work keeps improving and the thing underneath the work stays untouched. And the question worth sitting with is, it isn't whether you have high standards. You do. I do. You do. We have high standards. That's not the issue. The question is what decision your standards are currently standing in front of. Because there is one, and you know what it is already. So I hope this was helpful. Until then, I'll talk soon.